Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy Award-winning investigative journalists, Earthfiles reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
On September 11th, 2017, the UK Express headlined, "Does this photograph and shock new evidence solve Rendlesham UFO mystery once and for all?" With that headline, the Express ran a photograph of an all-white, cone-shaped NASA capsule used for Apollo moon missions until the mid-1970s. And then by the 1980s, the 67th Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron, known as the ARRS, was based at RAF Woodbridge to recover film from spy satellites that in capsules that would come down to the ground. At a recent small UFO conference in Hull, England, a speaker named Russ Callahan presented his hypothesis that the 37-year-old mystery of what happened over 3 nights of lights, beams, and unidentified craft in Rendlesham Forest near RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge could be explained by a Christmas night 1980 satellite drop of one of the white NASA cone-shaped capsules. But the idea that red, orange, blue, and white lights moving rapidly through Rendlesham Forest could be explained by a heavy, all-white, very solid NASA lunar capsule dropping from high in the sky with a big thud in the forest, that is so crazy that it should make every reader and listener laugh at its foolishness. But John Burroughs and I were taken aback when we realized that in addition to the September 11th UK Express article, here in the United States, the Coast to Coast radio website echoed the Express with another headline and article, "Could this capsule explain the Rendlesham UFO incident?" I was dismayed that the Coast radio website would promote such a phony hypothesis as news. On Coast, I have reported many facts and firsthand testimonies about Rendlesham Forest military eyewitness descriptions to lights, beams, and even an all-black, shiny, glass-like triangular craft that seemed to float on light. So why would this preposterous red herring of a NASA lander capsule even be considered by the Express and Coast as a legitimate news story? I emailed Coast webmaster Lex Lonehood and asked, quote, "Please help me understand why the Coast to Coast AM website would give the September 11th, 2017 UK Express article any distribution and publicity without getting reality checks from John Burroughs or Colonel Charles Halt or others who were actually there over the 72-hour period of December 26 to 28, 1980. During those nights, unidentified aerial lights and beams were seen by many U.S. Air Force service people. The lights and beams moved in the sky. They moved through the Rendlesham Forest, and they even directed white beams from the air down to the ground, where on the night of December 28, 1980, Colonel Halt and his team of at least a dozen men witnessed light phenomena all night long, and that included one thin white beam that came down from a spherical whiteness in the sky down to about 3 to 5 feet from Colonel Halt's shoes. I asked Coast webmaster Lex if the phony UK story could be replaced with true first-hand eyewitness testimony of John Burroughs, and gave Lex John's email contact information. To date, John Burroughs has not heard from anyone at Coast to Coast AM or the UK Express. Lex did email me to say that the Coast article was by Tim Banal, quote, who is writing daytime content for the Coast website and often uses items in the news for the basis of his pieces, close quote. Tim Banal replied that he rewrote the Express article as, quote, entirely speculative and does not entirely explain some of the other details surrounding the Rendlesham Forest case, close quote. Well, the truth is that an all-white, heavy NASA lander capsule does not explain any of the eyewitness reports of December 26 to 28, 1980. After this short break, John Burroughs will lead off with his perspective on why such a phony article could have made any headline today, disconnected from all actual facts of lights, beams, and craft phenomena in Rendlesham Forest in December 1980. Joining us to dig into why this phony red herring would be thrown to the news media at this time is Chuck DeCaro, one of the first reporters back in 1984 to investigate the Bentwaters Rendlesham Forest mystery for CNN. Chuck interviewed several of the military eyewitnesses when he was producing for a CNN Special Assignments Bureau in Washington, D.C. Today, Chuck is president of SAGE Inc., an acronym for Sea Aerospace Ground Evaluations that he operates in collaboration with periodic assignments for the Department of the Secretary of Defense and others based in McLean, Virginia.
Hi, it's AJ with Vibes Mind, Body, Spirit. The Vibes Tribe seeks to assist you in creating and maintaining an uplifting and balanced state of being in your personal space. Palo Santo is a mystical tree that grows on the coast of South America. Palo is loved by many for its energetic, cleansing, and healing properties and is also popularized for its heavenly presence in keeping your energy grounded and clear. Burning Palo provides an uplifting scent to raise your vibration and is also beneficial for relieving stress, anxiety, depression, and emotional pain. Palo Santo is also known for relieving symptoms of the common cold, headaches, and asthma. We offer Palo Santo in resin, powder, or by the stick. Go to onlinevibes.com for all of your vibration elevation needs and receive a free stick of Palo Santo with any online purchase over $25. Shop onlinevibes.com, that's onlinevibez.com, and get your vibes on today.
Do you worry a lot? If you're forgetful, nervous, moody, or overwhelmed, chances are you're not protecting yourself from the ravaging effects of stress and anxiety. No matter the cause, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, your quality of life, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in as little as 1 to 2 weeks and increase your ability to recall facts, names, and numbers in 4 to 12 weeks. Calm and Clever was created by scientist Kurt Hendricks, a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded studies on Alzheimer's disease. Try Calm and Clever for 2 months. You'll feel the difference. Call 1-800-758-8746 or go to calmandclever.com.
Your official contact for the best alternative talk on the planet. KGRAradio.com.
Thank you for joining us for Phenomenon Radio live broadcast every week exclusively on KGRAradio.com. And tonight's interview with former CNN investigative journalist Chuck DeCaro. He's got much more in his background than that, and we'll get into that later in the show. But to begin tonight's interview, here's John Burroughs. John?
Thanks, Race. Well, Linda left off with her monologue. She asked me to explain what I think is going on. I think the majority of this what took place this time was simply called clickbait. And that's what everybody's going to. I mean, it's going on in mainstream news even now, where they just throw a sensational story out there to get clicks to make money off of through advertisement. And the thing is that it's not shocking that the story came back out, but it's been around for years, to include the fact that this was revisited in 2010 at the 30th anniversary where the BBC talked about it, to include then a new witness came forward at that time, said he was burning manure in the field behind, and that's the coloring that we saw. So it doesn't surprise me, but that does two things. Number one, there's a lot of people out there that may not even know about the incident, know very little about it, and when they read its headlines, they click on and they start to wonder if it was a space capsule. And unfortunately, they don't do a lot of reasoning or critical thinking, and they go along the lines of, well, that must be what it is, okay? Or that's what it could be. When in fact, the story, nobody did any research on what the guy put out at the conference. The writers didn't. They just threw down a story trying to sensationalize it to get clickbait. But there's another factor to this too, which is the bigger picture going on with all of this. Chuck's covered this before. We want to go into it tonight. He's always said that he's not saying that we're maybe not alone, that there's not something else out there, but a lot of what takes place could be brought back to what we are doing ourselves militarily wise. So on that note, what's your take on this article, Chuck?
Well, I find it amusing. The guy's name is Banal. One, he can't spell. It's B-A-N-A-L. And if anything ever could be described as banal, it's this article. Banal means humdrum, monotonous, hackneyed, copied, just dumb, banal. And I got past the first two sentences and laughed and continued to laugh. He starts talking about super jolly green giants, or HH-53s. Well, an HH-53, which was supposed to be carrying this capsule, is powered by two 4,000 horsepower turboshaft engines. It's got 6 blades that are 72 feet across. The thing is 88 feet long. And if it's in a hover holding on a boilerplate Apollo capsule, the whole world smells like kerosene. What kind of a lunatic would write this? Unless he was banal, brain dead, homogenized. It's a lunacy, pure lunacy. How about that? I didn't want to sugarcoat it, but there you have it.
Well, okay. Then let's get past...
Tell him what an HH-53 looks like. How big the thing is. How much noise it makes.
Well, I understand it, and the fact that they were lifting a capsule out of the forest, on Christmas night. But that's the problem with Rendlesham, Chuck, and that's kind of what I want to set the stage for. Before Rendlesham, the lighthouse, the capsule, the capsule, burning manure, all kinds of things come out, and believe it or not, it gets more attention from the media than what really could have happened or what could have taken place.
No, there's no doubt for that. But I mean, you need to just lay out what went on there. Rendlesham and Bentwaters were twin base complexes started in World War II. They weren't far away from each other. The commanders talked by telephone, if not in person, every day. How somebody could wander into your airspace at the airfield next door without even calling anybody and drop off an Apollo boilerplate, it's lunatic. I mean, only a banal writer would be able to write something so lunatic. It's moronic.
And
well, let's get...
that comes back, John, to reinforcing that this was all nickel, dimes, clicks from the Express to the Coast website. But the bigger issue that you both are bringing up is what real, true, mysterious, let's say Tesla-like or other technology could have been being tested at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. It was then Europe's biggest NATO base that might have brought the attention or caught the attention of an alien intelligence.
I don't know about alien intelligence, but I mean, or any kind of experience, or maybe unintended consequences. I bring you back to the late 1950s when the U.S. Army tested lysergic acid diethylamide, 25, LSD, on unknowing troops. They were asked to volunteer. They were given this, cocktail. They drank it, and they try to do the obstacle course or the physical combat training test. And there are movies of it. And some of those guys were kind of screwed up. And that was the unintended consequence because it affected some people more than others. In this thing, in the Bentwaters, if I had a lot of money and wanted to do the research on it, and which requires a lot of sifting, I'd be looking for experiments that had consequences which were not anticipated, and so that was immediately shut down. That's what I think.
Right, but the problem is the activity took place even after the end of December and went in later on in January, even further down the lines, and there was stuff going on prior to that. The question is but prior to that and even after that, nobody really went out to the forest. It was most everything was observed from the back gate, in that area of Woodbridge. But before I go into some of these declassified projects that have come to light over the last few years, which I can say this to the audience, none of us lied to you as far as when we said what we saw, we didn't believe we had the technology available at the time to create those effects. But that's changed now. And what I mean by that was, for me personally, going back and finding these projects that have been declassified from the Cold War era, a lot of these could lead to what went on with us out there. And then also the fact that everyone else retired in the 90s. I stuck around until the mid-2000s with the Gulf War, and I was exposed to some stuff that I can't talk about to this day. But there were things that I saw then that relate back to what I saw then, back in 1980. So there's definitely, it could be a technology. And based on your background inside Department of Defense, Chuck, and the fact that you first took the story and you went over there and looked around, what did you leave? What with your initial investigations, talking to the witnesses, and your follow-up, what possibilities back then did you think were possible, and then your research afterwards?
Well, you got to understand that, I got transcripts of everything, but what's not in the transcripts is a seasoned reporter's sense of what was going on. Everybody I talked to that wore a uniform was sincere. They also had the characteristics of someone, a witness to an act of violence, a car crash, a murder, something like that.
Like post-traumatic shock, right? Like post-traumatic shock syndrome.
Or at least, as they're researching their heads, they're seeing what they saw and came back. So it was like the 1,000-yard stare. And every single witness that I talked to all had that characteristic of sincerity. Okay? That's what I noticed the most, John, including you. You remember, you were a young airman, scared to death when I showed up at your base in Arizona because a CNN reporter wanted to talk to you. And, you're sincere, sir. I didn't say anything, and then left. But the public affairs officer kind of pushed you on stage. You were sincere, but you're, wanted to keep your mouth shut and didn't want to talk about it. So, okay, fine.
Well, right, because we were being used.
I remember that distinctly.
Yeah, but Chuck, we were being used by the Air Force because the Air Force was caught in a pickle because that Holt memo got out. And they could, what could they do? Well, what could they do? They couldn't deny something happened. You have an official memo. That was an official memo by a lieutenant colonel. So what they were trying to do was act like they weren't covering up the memo. They weren't going to cover up something that took place. But at the same time, the briefing I got prior to talking to you was, let them know something took place, but don't go into too much details. And my question back to the one star was, exactly where do you want me to begin and stop? And there was a silence. I just think it's better I don't talk to him at all. And it was like, negative, you will go out and talk to him and let him know that an incident took place, because by you not even admitting that the incident took place, it looks like it's more of a cover-up than it really is.
Oh, that's true. But, the point that I'm trying to make is that the guys I talked to about Bentwaters were very, in their relation and their relating to me of events were sincere and were soul-searching, even in their own heads. I remember Master Sergeant B, because I promised not to reveal his name, you know what I'm talking about. He called me. I mean, you know, Air Force security policemen are a very introspective bunch of cops. They don't talk to anybody. Maybe inside security police they talk to one another, but they never call reporters. And he called me and said, well, what did you find out? I mean, there's really gut-level curiosity as to what happened that night. So, in my view, you know, this article lays waste to the sincerity of those young airmen that I interviewed 30-something years ago.
And Chuck, it's 3 nights, 26, 27, 28.
Sure. Concurred. But I'm just trying to say, I just can't believe that someone would publish an article that had so many obvious flaws in it, not the least of which is a gigantic noisemaker called a CH50 or an HH53. Who would believe that? You know, and to get an idea of what it smells like, I want everybody at home to turn on one of their little hurricane lights with the lamp oil, and then put your nose over the top of it and take a whiff of that kerosene, and that's what an HH53 smells like for about 100 yards around it. How anybody could miss anything like that, let alone the noise, it just mystifies me. Why you would ever write anything like that.
And you are reinforcing my reaction when I was doing a search on web images of the plane dropping the ARRS that would have film from a spy satellite. And it's big, and the big cables are big, and the capsule is big, and the whole thing is huge.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can make an argument, well, we're trying to recover a Samos or a Corona payload, but recovering it at night on Christmas night over at low level over bent waters doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
So,
well, I can tell you on our night there was no helicopters out there. Now, when you get to the third night, a couple people did say in the distance they may have heard a chopper. I think one of the witnesses said they even heard one of the officers say scramble a chopper. But the thing is they didn't leave from Woodbridge. They would have flown out of Martlesham Heath, which most people didn't know there was an airfield there. It was an airfield that was still being used by the 67th. But what I kind of like to go into now, Chuck, is I'd like to start. As you called him, Master Sergeant B, Colonel Halt on his tape, and what we saw in the sky, these blue lights flying around, right? They appear to be under intelligent control, which they very well could have been. But it doesn't mean it was alien technology that was controlling it. And why I say that was, at the time of the event, this was all highly classified stuff that what I'm talking to you now about is out there, it's available. So I'm not crossing any lines or asking you to cross any lines of stuff that's still classified, because some of the stuff is still blacked out and still considered classified. But it was a project called Code Witness, and it had to do with ionized plasmas, productions of luminous decoys of military origin, which made creating plasmas. They were using them for targeting, and they could manipulate them with lasers in the skies. And what he described was these blue lights flying around, appearing and reappearing, and beams of light coming down. Well, this very well project, and this was being done right there at Bawdsey with Marconi and everything else right there at Martlesham Heath. This very well could have been some of what was going on. And I'd like you to fill the listeners in on what you know about what's been declassified about all this.
Okay, well, first of all, fill the listeners in on what we're talking about, because Bawdsey doesn't make any sense unless you put it in context. Bawdsey was the original RAF Radar Research Center, which is further down the coast from Bentwaters and Woodbridge. 15 miles or a little less.
Right. Remember? It was like a triangle between Martlesham Heath, Bawdsey, and us.
Not far. But that was the original Royal Air Force Radar Research Center. And what they started on, the origins of radar between World War I and World War II, what they were really experimenting with initially was a death ray. But they couldn't get the joules, the amount of energy, out of the apparatus they were playing with. at the time, but they did notice an odd phenomena, is that it would bounce. These radio waves that were sending out would bounce and come back. They noticed that on their receivers, that if an aircraft flew past, you'd get a variation in the return signal, and that led to, well, I guess we can't kill anybody with a death ray, but hey, this might be able to give us important information. And radar means radio detection and ranging. So by sending a radio beam out and bouncing off something, you could measure, by the speed of light out and back, how far away and what direction it was. And that was the basis for the chain home radar system that formed the original network, originally started in World War I and then amplified by the Royal Air Force in World War II, that led to the Britain's ability to win the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. Okay, so that's Bawdsey in perspective. That was the place to go for weird things electronic. After the war, Bawdsey and other places in the United States took up a bunch of German scientists in a project called Paperclip, which was supposedly just German rocket scientists, but it was the grab of all the brain power in Germany, so the Soviets wouldn't get them, and so that we could, have that knowledge at our beck and call. Some of those people had to do with radar and other things, and they went out to continue their research in Britain and in the United States after the war.
And John, isn't it true that you have firsthand knowledge that Bawdsey had underground tunnel systems?
Yeah, when it's been closed, and when I was over there, I think it was in 2013, they actually were able to get into this facility itself, and there were tunnels leading underground from the site that connect. Well, first of all, there was stuff on there connecting to certain other radar sites that were involved with their testing, and there were tunnels leading to Marlsham Heath into the Woodbridge Forest.
All right, now wait, guys. Before we get into conspiracy theories, okay, let me give you some reading, okay? Those tunnels were there on purpose long before this, long before UFOs and before even Foo Fighters. Let me explain. There were two books written in the 80s. One was called War Plan UK, and the other one was called Unsinkable Aircraft Carrier. And they were about just that, the tunnels. The Brits, seeing that war was coming, started digging about 1938 or so, early 1938, and didn't stop until about 1992. So that little island out there is a Swiss cheese of tunnels, all designed with the idea of defense in mind. On one hand, it goes off to things like the Home Guard sleeper cells that had underground bunkers everywhere in England to continue a guerrilla war until the Commonwealth could come back and, with or without the help of the United States, take the island back. That's a really interesting story about underground bunkers, small ones. But then there were all the other things. I mean, one of the things in Bath is this vast, and when I mean vast underground complex. On one side was a giant aircraft factory who that never really came to fruition, but because at the time they finished tunneling all that sandstone out, the United States was coming into the war, and it wasn't needed with the urgency when it was initiated. The other half was a gigantic ammunition storage facility of the Royal Navy. What's really interesting is now that you can find, even on YouTube, the paintings, the murals that were done by one of the denizens there to keep the morale up in this sandstone labyrinth under the ground in Bath. So when you say tunnels and galleries, they started in 1938 and kept on digging.
But can I add something to this, Chuck?
Sure. Okay,
there was a guy, his name's Andrew Pike. Now, he was working on the Phenomenon Project in the area right after the incident took place. Right. He openly admitted that there were two things that he came out with based on, he was actually looking at an energy field that could have been in the area and was creating these plasmas or whatever we might have seen. But he admitted they were using that particular tunnel out of Bawdsey with EM generators to blast EM frequencies through those tunnels out towards the forest. Now, I wouldn't go into detail on what they were doing. In other words, I'm not saying he said they were trying to zap us. I don't think we were ever supposed to be out there. I think we just...
It's right, because the status... Let's go back and talk about the status of forces agreement. So, again, everybody understands this is very complex stuff. And without the background, it seems, I hate to use the word alien, but you need to understand what was going on. The status of forces agreement, you have U.S. nationals in uniform, armed, inside a base, Bentwaters and
Woodbridge,
that were they were RAF bases leased to the United States. And the status of forces agreement says you can't go outside this base unless you're escorted by the Brits, right? And you certainly can't
unless
go
it's
outside
an immediate threat. If there's an immediate threat,
okay, yeah. And the immediate threats were real then because, again, putting it all in context, we had the Red Brigades, Baader-Meinhof, blowing people up in 1980-81, remember?
Right.
And so, you could do that, but it was still rare for armed United States Air Force security police patrolmen, armed with M203s, which are M16 with a 40-millimeter grenade launcher, to leave the base. And here we were out in the woods looking at this stuff. So all of that was unusual as well. So, if the Brits were looking at doing some experiments, they would never have thought that U.S. Air Force security police patrolmen would have left the gate, the east gate.
Right. And the other thing...
So the point would be is you were the unintended consequence. Possibly.
Right. And the other thing was that there was EM generators that were in the manuals, of the military manuals, that right after the story broke in News of the World, Margaret Thatcher had those EM generators pulled out of their manuals.
Okay. Now, wait a minute. When you say EM generators, you mean electromagnetic pulse. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, generators.
Okay.
And he said they were shooting electromagnetic pulses through that tunnel into the forest area.
Well, I don't know what that would have solved, but
what did
you could.
Well, if you were working on SDI and tracking and radars, there would be an experiment going on. And one of the things that we talked about before we came on the show, Chuck, was one of the things that I found interesting about your work right after Rendlesham was EM and manipulation, right? But the thing is that Sage radar, which Sage wasn't there at the Bawdsey, but it was the equivalent of Sage, because we've looked into that it could be reversed and it actually could create these EM frequencies, including terahertz radiation. So if they were working on tracking whatever, and they were working on creating plasmas off an energy field that they even said may have existed in the area anyway, and they were trying to create plasmas, and they were getting up at the sky working on targeting, they would probably have to use some kind of EM generators, wouldn't they, to do something like that?
Okay, well, let's go back and open this area up a little bit and talk about electromagnetic pulse and various ways to do it. The simplest electromagnetic pulse is a lightning bolt. A lot of energy, in a very short amount of time. And if you could hit things with a lightning bolt, you would have very deleterious effects on that object. So there were numerous spin-offs of this idea, one of which I did a story on. I did another documentary within a few months of the Bentwaters documentary, and that was called the Zap Gap, about electromagnetic weapons. And they range from very small magnetic weapons that had subtle influence on brain function at close range, all the way over to particle beam weapons. And in between, we talked about things like free electron lasers and gyrotrons. Now, let's go back to your radar. The radars you're talking about were early phased array radars. Now, phased array radar works differently from the conventional turning antenna. The antenna sends out a beam. Imagine it as like a searchlight. It sends out a beam of light, or sends out a beam of radio energy like an invisible searchlight. And like a searchlight, if it sees an object, it reflects, a searchlight reflects light, an airplane reflects a radar, okay? And that's how you turn the radar. Well, with the advent of computers, you don't have to rotate anymore. Imagine a three-pronged antenna shaped like a T. And with that antenna, you could shoot the first dipole to the left, one straight ahead, and one to the right. So using a computer, and you have a whole array of these things, thus the name phased array, you could sweep from side to side. But you could also program it to take all those antennas and point at a point in space where all of that energy is focused. Same breadboard, but it works in a different way. So the kinds of things that you're talking about are all products of engineering that exists and existed back then. The effects, on the other hand, may have been not exactly what they expected. Just like in the early Bawdsey projects in the 1930s, they were working on a death ray and ended up with radar.
Right, and the thing is if you're working in targeting plasmas, and Andrew Pike was down there researching there was supposedly an energy field down there, and it was creating natural plasmas. Would you not then be trying to poke the natural plasmas too? Because there's one other generator I want to bring up to you in a second that I'm not saying would have directly or could have actually been one of the things they were testing based on a declassified CIA document, DIA document. But could that not explain the blue lights, the moving around, the beams coming back and forth, and the effect, like you were talking off air about hair standing up and different things like that?
Sure. But, there are two things here. One is, are you actually seeing a blue light, or is there a direct impingement on the optic nerve in your brain so you think you're seeing a blue light? If you look at my documentary, The Zap Gap, which I did for CNN in 1985, shortly after the Bentwaters, I recall the sequence, I went over to talk to Dr. Robert Becker about these things. And he wrote a book called Maxwell's Silver Hammer, which talks about electromagnetic effects on humans. And I would highly recommend that book as background reading before we get into the subject of electromagnetic effects. So you have a one-to-one correspondence with understanding that humans are more biophysical creatures than they are biochemical creatures, and thus can be affected by things that are otherwise imperceptible, like electromagnetic energy. And in that documentary, you'll see that I guinea pigged in a couple of experiments that left me a believer in the potential of such weaponry.
Right, and I've got that link pulled up. Do you? And I don't want to get too far into it. Is MK Ultra real, or was that just people speculating on something was going off the East Coast?
Yeah, but no, MK Ultra came out in 1974 CIA hearings. And it was, a project of, what you could do for mind control. The problem the things that they find out is, yeah, you can do that, but all these different things they tested, chemicals, magnetics, other kinds of influence, it's not like the effect of alcohol on humans. You can't guarantee that the effect will be the same across a general population. You know from your Air Force days that some guys who are, have 2 beers and they're a mean drunk, and other guys who are fierce normally are really mellow after 10 beers and are a happy drunk. And the common additive that changes personality happens to be alcohol, but it doesn't have the same effects across everybody. So the idea of mind control, universal mind control, is a fairy tale. You might be able to do it once or twice, but to what end?
Right.
Guaranteed to work every time. It's not like you're going to drop a 500-pound bomb in for sure. You're going to have a lethal radius of over 100 meters. Right,
but the thing is that those effects, like you said, early on the British were working on a death ray, which, by the way, they built. Right, but they built that nuclear power generator just down the coast from Bawdsey that would have given them the energy necessary to work on these projects. But
they damn near had a Chernobyl at that thing in the late 1950s, early 60s when they built it, because they were in such a hurry to build that reactor that they really shortcutted around it. It was air-cooled rather than water-cooled, and the aluminum fins that they used for cooling right at the edge, and they had a tremendous problem and almost a Chernobyl event there. So I'd be careful about talking about the reliability of power from that reactor.
Right, but it's still there today. But what I'm going with this, they built this reactor to draw the energy source off, because there was really not a reason to have that reactor where it was. Any other reason? There was no major cities. If you're going to build a reactor like that, you build it near London, not out in the middle of nowhere. Okay.
Right, well, they're using it for bomb materials. That's why they're using it, because in order.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's a wonderful documentary about that reactor and the political impetus that drove the hurried assembly of that reactor, so that Britain could enter the nuclear club with the United States. You know, even though British scientists had helped, particularly with the explosive lens of the plutonium Mark IV bomb, they were kind of shut out after the end of the war, and left to their own devices to create their own bomb to be co-equal to the United States. And they did. But they took some very scary shortcuts in doing so.
Right. So if you had them working on plasmas, they were even trying to figure out the energy source there. And you had them also working on targeting plasmas and using that up in the air. Because one of the things that I've held back because of the debacle with the MOD recent release of their files, they admitted they were holding more, and now the way they've just done it is a crime. Those are the kind of things Nick Pope called it open government, but basically they said, here are the documents. They're mostly redacted. You can't look at them. You can't use them online unless you come down to where we store them and look at them, and you can't copy them and bring them out. But according to Nick Pope, that was open government. But ultimately, and they held back the three most important files still, and they still haven't given a release date for those. But that's the kind of stories that should be being talked about, not whether or not the capsule was flying through the forest on 3 nights in 1980. But getting back to a generator, have you ever heard of a psychotronic generator?
Sure.
Okay, can you explain to the guys what that is?
Yeah. But when you're looking at developing electromagnetic pulse, you want to look at something like a gyrotron, which is one step along the way, halfway between a magnetron and a free electron laser. And the Russians were working on gyrotrons, that's Gyrotrons, gyrotrons, early on, and we're looking at hooking up big gyrotrons to a phased array antenna for both, extreme long range radar, but also possibility of using it to focus energy at a distance, to put a lot of energy on a point in space, like a satellite. The Soviet Union thankfully collapsed before they perfected the thing, but I think that gyrotrons were an interesting sidelight that may need to be revisited, mainly because the U.S. scientific community gives you a really bad case of not invented here, relative to things, their pet projects.
Right, but what the psychotronic generators, what were they used for?
Psychotronic generators?
Yeah. The Soviets and the Czechoslovakians were working on it. This is a declassified document that was in 1975, and from there, we started working on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've really heard the term psychotronic generators. I've heard psychotronic effects from electromagnetic pulse or modulated magnetic fields, but I hadn't heard the term psychotronic generator. I think that's more popular press than it is science.
No, this is a declassified DIA-CIA document. It's right in there.
What's it say?
It's,
when they say psychotronic generator, when they get into the fine print,
it goes a psychotronic generator, also called, and I'll screw this guy's name up, the Pavalta or PAVLITA generators. after the inventor are small devices said to be capable of drawing biological energy from humans. This energy is accumulated and stored for future use. Once charged with human energy, the generators can do some of the things a psychic subject can do, but according to the inventor, Robert, and his last name Poalto or whatever, can be charged by individuals possessing no psychic ability. Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah. Well, if you look at my documentary, it's on YouTube. One of the things I did against the will of my boss, Ted Kavanaugh at CNN, was a guinea pig in an experiment. And what I was interested in was the effects of a modulated magnetic field of low energy. This is not sticking your head in a microwave oven. These are tiny effects. And I did this in a laboratory in San Francisco with two scientists who were using then Soviet scientific data and built this modulated magnetic field device. And again, you can look at the documentary, The Zap Gap, and take a look at it. And what we talked about is that, remember I said that we're more biophysical creatures than we are biochemical creatures. And therefore, things like electromagnetic and magnetic effects do things to humans. For instance, the natural harmonic frequency of the Earth's magnetic field is around 33 hertz or so. And it also happens to be ELF and that sort of thing. But it would stand to reason that if you are born in this electromagnetic soup, that you might be affected by changes in magnetic fields. Now, there isn't a tremendous amount of research that shows one correspondence between one kind of magnetic field and another that's universal across demographics. However, there were many scientists, the most famous of which was Dr. Jose Delgado, that's D-E-L, new word G-A-D-O, who did a tremendous amount of research dating back from the mid-50s through the time of his death in about 10 years ago or so. And yes, he was able to demonstrate on high-order primates mood changes at will by just playing with a rheostat and modulating the magnetic field. This kind of research was replicated by the late Dr. Ross Adey, A-D-E-Y, at the Loma Linda Veterans Hospital. And he was then demonstrated back in the 80s calcium efflux from cat brain cells because it couldn't operate on humans. But yeah, there was a good deal of research on the interface between magnetic fields and human thinking. And also in that experiment in which I took part, what was demonstrated was a kind of artificial telepathy. In a room, I was blindfolded and I had my ears blocked. I had an EEG sensor, I think it was an 11-pin sensor, wrapped around my scalp with the pins, watching my brain waves go by. And in another room, after some experimentation, was an oscilloscope whose planform, whose parabolas were being generated in a way to lay upon this carrier type of magnetic field. And while I was there, eventually I could see the waveform of the parabola with my eyes closed, and I could see it much like you would look at the after image of a bright light. Look at a bright light, close your eyes, you see that phosphorescent after image, except my eyes were closed the whole time, and I could tell the X and Y axes, or that is how tall and how wide the parabola was, and could see the changes in that parabola being generated in another room in real time. And that's all documented on video in that experiment. So when you're talking about mind-machine, mind-EW or EM interface, yeah, that's all possible.
And Chuck, in the Condign report that was UK eyes only, the unidentified aerial phenomena by DI-55, it states in that appendix F as in Frank 4 that the frequencies, which we now know are terahertz between microwave and infrared, that they are discussing how they can manipulate human minds with terahertz frequencies, and that there are certain organs, such as a heart, that has spaces in it. The heart muscle has cavities, and that's where terahertz can cause vibrations in an organ like a heart and do damage specifically there. And John knows firsthand that the terahertz can destroy the leaflets in the mitral valve.
Yes, but there's another issue here, Linda. That's way up at in RF, radio frequency energy, and not radio frequency wavelengths, radio frequency energy at high energy levels, at tiny millimeter wave, or certainly sub-millimeter wave wavelengths.
It's on wait, Chuck, just for a second. I'm looking right at the electromagnetic frequency chart. And at the terahertz, it is high, and it is in a special band, and sometimes it's actually lifted up from the 1 millimeter at a microwave going into infrared, but it is nevertheless categorized as a high frequency electromagnetic wave.
No doubt about it, but there's high frequency, but there's also high energy. Okay. You put something in a microwave oven, it's going to cook it. Okay, now you're talking about something at a higher frequency, and it'll probably cook it too. However, the kinds of things I'm talking about are magnetic in nature rather than radio frequency, and they're at low energy levels. Sort of like if the human mind was a door, using modulated magnetic fields in low energy levels is like putting a key in a door and turning the lock, opening it up. When you're talking about terahertz, what you're talking about is a sledgehammer breaking the door down. You're still going to get inside, but there are different ways of doing it.
But Chuck, isn't it true, because we talked about this earlier tonight, and maybe I misunderstood you, or I want to make sure I got this right, because another engineer said that those radars could be modified to create more than one type of frequency. They could be used to modulate the terahertz frequency and the lower frequencies, and it was the SAGE radar that the United States had, but it was a different type. It was called by a different name that the British were using. But it was there at Bawdsey at the time.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as you get, you can do some strange things even with just millimeter wave radars. But basically, all we're talking about here are the effects of energy being projected through radio frequency wavelengths.
Right.
You go up to infrared. An infrared beam can cook you just like a microwave beam if you have enough energy in it.
Right. Now, my question to you before we go to break, because we're coming up on our first, and maybe we can hit it on the way back. If this is not conspiracy now, there was supposedly some kind of an energy field there already in the forest area. They've never, at least publicly, identified where it was coming from. When we went over in 10, we picked that field up ourselves with the equipment we had. But if it created natural plasmas, and we have some of that on infrared that we caught, that they were appearing at the night, yep, would the government not be trying to study it and utilize it, and what kind of effect would it cause, not only on the surrounding areas that they're doing it, but anybody that would be in the area?
Well, I'm not sure that those people experimenting would know either, but I would go talk to some volcanologists, because they're the ones familiar with piezoelectric effects. You know, in the Earth's crust, when you've got subduction of tectonic plates, and they bump into each other, they get a tremendous amount of energy, and there's a phenomenon called piezoelectric effects, where these balls of light, or balls of like plasma or ball lightning, seem to be coming out of the volcano or along a seismic fault. So is that phenomena possible? You betcha. And I guess there are documentaries out that show, I recall one many years ago, we get a chunk of granite and you put it in a hydraulic press, and it eventually detonates. Well, when it detonates, it produces heat, noise, and guess what? An electromagnetic pulse. Now, it's not a gigantic one, but there's a flash of energy when that happens. So now you're taking literally tectonic plates, huge chunks of Earth against each other, creating extraordinary pressures. And one of the things that released is, radio frequency energy that would create a plasma that about which you are now talking in the Bentwaters area. Now,
Chuck, it is time for a commercial break. Pick this back up over the top into the next half hour.
Thank you, Linda, John, and Chuck. This 45-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio has been brought to you by OnlineVibes.com. Your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit. Committed to connecting you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. Visit the website at onlinevibes.com. Tonight's very special guest, the Chuck DeCaro, will return right after these messages. Stay with us.
Listening to the KGRA digital broadcasting station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
You read about UFOs, strange creatures, and ghosts. You watch videos about them. Do you know how to investigate them? Chase Kletsky does. For 20 years, she's been Indiana Jones and Laura Croft rolled into one. The real hunter of Bigfoot, ghosts, and UFOs. She goes everywhere, from remote woods to ghost-infested buildings to the highlands of South America, hunting down strange things in our world. Now she's written a book to show you how it's done. Co-authored with UFO researcher Richard Dolan, Chase lays it out. How to prepare, what to bring, interviewing witnesses, doing a stakeout, handling evidence, and documenting it the right way. Get Admissible, the field manual for investigating UFOs, paranormal activity, and strange creatures. Learn more at richarddolanpress.com.
Also available on Kindle.
Hi, this is Matt Ray for My Pillow. Look, I'd forgotten what a good night's sleep was like. Then I got a hold of My Pillow. I used to wake up with neck and shoulder pain. I thought it was the new normal. But after one night of using My Pillow, my neck and shoulder pain is gone, and I'm sleeping comfortably through the night. My Pillow's patented interlocking fill conforms to your personal sleep needs. It's guaranteed not to go flat. It's washable, it's dryable, and it's made in the USA, not to mention the 10-year warranty. Try it risk-free with a 60-day money-back guarantee. What have you got to lose besides back pain and shoulder pain? Right now, America's First News has a great deal. Try it for yourself. Call now. You'll get 50% off a 4-pack. That's 2 premium pillows and 2 travel pillows. Call now, 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY, R-A-Y. That's 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone. And something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at Earthfiles.com.
For the thousands of wounded warriors returning from battle, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps wounded warriors translate their military experience to a civilian job. These extraordinary men and women bring more than just teamwork and inspiration to the workplace. They bring proven world-class job skills. And to ensure proper placement, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right job fit. Talented, skilled, and eager to get back to work, you have the opportunity to hire a seasoned veteran. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
You're listening to Phenomenon Radio Live right here on KGRAradio.com, exclusively every Thursday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, just before Jimmy Church and Fade to Black. It's time for the news, and it's brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Race. Earth scientists placed an amazing machine in orbit around Saturn in July 2004. It's called Cassini. And since then, that amazing orbiter has sent back to Earth thousands of beautiful images of the giant ring planet. Over the past 13 years, Cassini has enabled scientists to study Saturn and its vast rings as never before. And now that great spacecraft must come to an end because its fuel has run out. Tomorrow morning, September 15th, at 4:55 a.m. Pacific, NASA thinks now, which is 7:55 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Cassini will be flying about 76,000 miles per hour when NASA at JPL in Pasadena, California, will move Cassini into position to aim one of its instruments to sample Saturn's atmosphere as the spacecraft gets closer and closer to the huge ringed planet. Then data about Saturn's atmosphere will stream back to the Deep Space Network. Controllers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena will be calculating when Cassini sends its final signal. That could be 4:55 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time tomorrow morning, Friday, September 15th. And in the 60 seconds before final transmission, Cassini will have fired its thrusters trying to keep its high-gain antenna pointing to Earth for as long as possible. But by the time the last data reaches JPL, Cassini will already have disappeared in flames 83 minutes earlier. That's how long it takes for light to travel from Saturn to Earth. NASA TV will broadcast Cassini's end online beginning at 4 a.m. Pacific or 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, Friday, September 15th. I have placed a hot link to the NASA TV website at my Earthfiles.com headline report about this Cassini death. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earthfiles news updates on KGRA Radio and visit every day my science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news, brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Now back to the program with Chuck DeCaro. Here's Linda.
Thank you, Race and Chuck. In the DI-55 Project Condign about unidentified aerial phenomena that the Ministry of Defense in England received in the year 2000, it was secretly unclassified in the year of December 2006. And none of us knew that it existed until around the time that John was fighting the failure of his heart, and he had to have that open heart surgery on December 18th, 2013. And before then, we had a link between the problems with his heart and terahertz frequencies, and we learned that this information had gone to John's VA doctors from Christopher Green, Kit Green, who by his own admission now publicly has worked for the CIA for at least 50 years, in the beginning inside of the agency and then subcontracting as a doctor. And it was Kit Green who knew about the impact of terahertz frequencies from unidentified aerial phenomena / UFOs. UAP is the UK choice. UFO has been the American choice to talk about unidentified aerial phenomena. And in the Condign report, it's 460 pages long. There is a section where it has a sketch of a male body standing up with various distances that are described going out to, I think, out to 300 feet, showing the impact of the frequencies on the human body. In your work now and in the past, have you ever had any assignments or had to do research or do anything having to do with terahertz impact on the human body?
Nope. But, microwaves, and terahertz would be a subset of that. But, again, I can speak to microwave energy. I know, for instance, in certain scientific establishments, when they're trying to do brain section on mice and rats, in order to stop their brain chemistry instantly so they can then section the brain, they put the head of the mouse in a waveguide and shoot a large amount of electromagnetic energy down the waveguide and instantly kill the mouse. And then they can do a brain section without screwing up the brain chemistry.
And Chuck, what did they find is the part of the brain that the electromagnetic frequencies interact and kill?
Well, I think it just stops all activity. Boom, just like that. I'm not a scientist. I don't claim to be. I'm reporting to you from memory the notes that I keep in my head about various kinds of phenomena. But and I'm again working from memory, not from a script. I'm just telling you that radio frequency energy of all types can be absorbed, reflected, or refracted, and it can have beneficial or deleterious effects on humans. I mean, I'll give you an example. During the Battle of Britain, Reginald V. Jones, who was head of air scientific intelligence for the RAF, was looking at the German beam bombing. The Germans would fly along a radio beam. On one side it was dida, the other side was dadit, and when you're on a beam, literally that's where the word comes from, you'd hear a tone. Hoot. We use the same thing. There would be a cross beam, and when you heard that, it would be a minute from bombs away, and then another cross beam, and drop the bombs. They called it blind bombing back then. Okay. Reginald V. Jones said, well, if we set up a bunch of transmitters that can be utilized to one side or the other of the beam, we can bend the beam and they'll drop their bombs in a field. What he used were radio frequency machines that were being used in British hospitals to send radio energy to warm up the skin and bones of arthritis patients, giving them some relief. They simply took these machines out, put antennas on them, planted them in fields, and caused the bending of the beam. So there's always been an interesting interaction between, radio frequency devices and humans.
So, Chuck, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You talked to a lot of the witnesses, whether when you first did the investigating over the years, and there was always people saw different things or they interpreted differently. And early on, you said, that, like you said, Colonel Hall could have thought he saw blue lights, but it was something else. Based off of what Condign talks about, and they're talking about some kind of unknown phenomena, and the technology we had available, that would help explain why we all remember things differently or can't remember things, correct?
Well, exactly, but it's the same thing I spoke earlier. Let's say you've got your Air Force Security Police Patrol Squadron at a Christmas party, and everybody's drinking. Some guys go to sleep, some guys go into fight, some guys get laugh happy, and it's all the same common drug that they're taking, alcohol. It has different effects on different people. It doesn't always work the same way. Thus, if you're in some, powerful electromagnetic field of some sort, could you have different? Yeah, you bet.
We'd remember it differently too, correct?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't, vouch for your memories or the memories from Airman G or Sergeant.
But I mean, could that effect create that? A person?
Yeah, you could do that. Look, there's a lot of published information out there. Alan Fry, Dr. Alan Fry, talked about radar hearing back in the 1960s and 70s. Some people can hear radar, and they're trying, the two theories were that one, some people can absorb the radar energy and it causes a shock wave, between the skull and the blood-brain barrier and sends out the pulse, and it's interpreted as sound. But they're hearing the pulse repetition frequency of the radar. I would advise the listeners to look up Dr. Alan Fry and look up the term radar hearing. And some people obviously can't.
I can remember. I'm sorry.
If you've ever been in a building that has the ultrasonic anti-rodent devices, very, very high-pitched frequency. And I remember when I was a reporter in New Orleans before I went to CNN that I could walk into a restaurant and it would knock me off my feet. I couldn't hear anything, but it was a powerful, a sensation of sound of pressure. And it turned out that it was a beam from one of these ultrasonic devices that are used to keep rodents out of the kitchen.
Okay.
And some people didn't hear it at all or sense it at all. So different people are affected in different ways by different stimuli.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me when you were on in December with Colonel Hall, and you brought it up, and he kind of poo-pooed it, and we didn't go into it in any more detail. You told him, or you mentioned to him, that you wanted to go down the line of possibly mind manipulation or control, and he just kind of went over it, and you never followed up with it. In what way could we have been manipulated or controlled by whatever it was?
Well, again, when I did a documentary on radio frequency weapons called the ZapCap, I guinea pig an experiment. It was magnetic, modulated magnetic, and I could image. I guess seeing is the wrong word because my eyes are closed, but I could image a parabola being generated in another room. That was 35 years ago. I mean, with the advances of computer technology today to drive such a thing, you could probably see three-dimensional images easily. Okay.
All right. So my question to you is, now we've got Condyne and we've got what they say is an unidentified phenomena, aerial UAPs, right? But then we have what we were working on then up till today.
Right.
What you heard the witness describe to you, based on your background, was everything that took place out there in that field possible? It could have all been us, based on the technology we had at the time.
Well, I've been telling you this for years, John. Before I would go to, say, alien phenomena, I would look at all the things in the realm of the probable that are terrestrially based. If I couldn't prove any of that, then I'll go to look at some other thing. But first, I need to disprove any of the stuff that might be terrestrially generated. And, we've been friends a long time. And I've told you this over the years, over the decades, that not so sure. And now you're learning that there's other things there,
Well, not really. I listened to you a long time ago, and I'm on the fence. And what I mean by on the fence was I still can't get past Condyne and this unidentified aerial phenomena, okay?
Right.
That the British government says it exists. Right. But they say it exists and that they're trying to weaponize it, and it has the same effects that we've described with radars and everything else. So my question, I guess, is if that particular field was there, okay? And they actually, and that was one of the interesting things that never got any coverage, but there was one of the memos, because Nick Pope made this big deal about going like, well, there's nothing new in there. Actually, there was. In the released documents, the MOD was having a conversation back and forth about how we were exposed to UAPs.
And John and Chuck, it says right in a section of the Condign report, they're describing the speeds on radar. They are describing, they even use the word, something like unprecedented, not terrestrial, in the Condign report about the, we'll call it the maneuvering of what it is that their military have documented and radar operators have seen. This is far, far outside of terrestrial aviation.
Okay, but wait. You're talking about radar. Radar tracks, it doesn't track airplanes. What it tracks is reflections, or what it thinks there are reflections. You can make a radar, any radar, tell the human operator something different from what's happening. And this is called side lobe attacks, for instance. I'll give you an idea. You look at a flashlight. There's a beam ahead, but if you notice there are beams to the left and right. Have you ever noticed that with a flashlight? Yeah.
Well, yeah. There's a fall off. It isn't like a laser.
Yeah. Well, no, but what I'm saying is the same way. You've got a concave antenna using a feed horn, and what happens is you get things called side lobes. Well, you can attack electronically the radar side lobes and make the radar operator think that something is going really fast or really slow or hanging in there. It depends on the quality of the computers that support the radar and the quality of the brain power of the operator to know what's real and what's not. Now, if you're talking about Christmas night, the first string radar operators are going to be there. And if someone's experimenting with plasma decoys, lasers, anything that causes ionization, you're going to get reflections that are going to look like incredible speeds. You got to disprove that those weren't there before you jump to alien vessels.
Well, right, but
I do not disbelieve that there's intelligent life out there in the universe. But before I get to that, let me make sure that there are other things that are classified for military reasons, or classified because there was a screw up in the way they did things, and go from there.
I agree, but I guess what I'm trying to get at, Chuck, is that the MOD, through a declassified document, admitted these UAPs exist. They're not really sure what they are, and that doesn't make them ET from planet whatever you want to call it, or it was an alien vehicle. Matter of fact, they don't call them vehicles. It's an energy source, right? But it affects people when they're around them. They've said that, and actually in the document, it said it brought down aircraft at one point. These were able to bring down aircraft, and also that most wing commanders were briefed on these because their pilots had to know how to deal with them if there was an interaction with them.
Well, that's true, but they're also, if you look at the history of the UH-60 helicopter, okay, which had in its earliest days had an unshielded electronic interface with, I believe, the tail rotor. When it would pass a microwave tower, it would lose control. And that's, granted, it's a man-generated microwave, but it was an unanticipated side effect. In early F-16s, which was a completely electronic airplane, that's why they called it an electric jet, you weren't connected to the jet, you were connected to the computer, which was connected to the jet. And they had a weird phenomena where not every time, but sometimes when they fire the gun under certain atmospheric conditions, you get a static discharge that was sensed by a sensor, and that sensor then said, "Oh, you mean full right rudder?" So you're in a dive pass with a jet shooting a 20 millimeter cannon, and the airplane unknowingly responds to a static discharge and goes in a right full rudder, causing a crash. So when they say that there are phenomena out there, yeah, like you really don't want to fly through thunderstorms either.
Well,
right, but there is, what I'm saying is there is an unknown aerial phenomenon, at least to the public, that exists that can create effects. It acts like plasma, and according to the document, obviously, and a lot of it's still classified, it actually affects humans. It can cause damage, and they're not sure what it is, but is it intelligent or not? And could that be a lot of what we're dealing with besides our own technology?
And John, you need to add that it comes right out of that 460-page report. There is a graph, a summary, in which they talk about the shapes of the UAPs, and they define them as cylindrical, spherical, lens-shaped, triangular, ice cream cone shaped. These are all described as matter world shapes of the UAPs that also match all of the wide variety of UFO reports.
Okay, but yeah, yes and no. I tell you what, Linda, reach into your purse and grab a quarter, okay? And hold a quarter between your forefinger and your thumb, okay? When you're looking at it, it's round. You move it 45 degrees and it's elliptical. You move it another 45 degrees and it's flat. Okay? It really depends on the perception. So if you're seeing anything, depends on your point of view. And that covers most of the objects you just talked about.
Well, Chuck, I understand the exercise, but after at least 70 years, really longer reports than that, from lots of military people that I've interviewed, and they know what the sky is and they know what flies in the sky. And when you have a military guy who is saying this was an object, and this is the shape, and it was 820 feet in diameter, and it had this, and it had that. They're describing something that is real in this matter world.
That's true. But again, if you're talking about a terrestrial phenomenon involving electromagnetic fields or magnetic fields, okay, one is magnetic energy, the other one is radio frequency energy, affecting humans and human thought. You know, I guinea pigged in experiments where literally I was seeing things with my eyes closed. Now, those things happen to be parabolas, but, you know.
Yeah, but my first question is, how do you know it's terrestrial? How do we know when you have that magnetic effect that something else doesn't happen, is what I guess I'm asking you.
I don't know. No, it's a valid point. But if we're now recently, I guess the last 20 years or so, talked about discovery of piezoelectric effects around faults and around volcanoes.
But none of that was there in Rendlesham Forest.
Okay, and
so you
Chuck,
said that there was an energy field there.
Chuck, I videotaped piezoelectric effects in Colorado School of Mines for a TV report at KMGH in Denver. And when this is that big lab where they compress the rocks to create piezoelectric. It was the tiniest sparks. I was shocked. These were like tiny flint sparks. There was nothing at all that could ever be explained as an 820-foot diameter aerial object. These are tiny sparks.
But Linda, I think what Chuck's trying to say, and I'm not trying to cut you off, Chuck, is if you're affected by a field, whether it's from somewhere else or us, your mind's going to react differently or take it as something that maybe isn't totally there. They did that with Persinger did that with the God helmet. And when electrical pulses are put on, what is it, your pineal gland or whatever, it can make you see something that's not really what. Explain it, Chuck. You're better at it than me.
Linda, your point is well taken.
Thank you.
But again, there are terrestrial. And again, one more time, I'm not denying that there may be intelligent life out there. I concur with you on that. But I'm just trying to go rationally. Let's first look at terrestrial possible effects before we jump to the others. Okay?
But again, if you don't know what the effect is for sure, according to Condyne, how would you know if it's terrestrial or not? That's, I guess, my question.
Well, I agree, but they're calling it phenomena, which is an unknown. A phenomena, by definition, is an unknown quantity. How does that work? So they're not saying this is extraterrestrially.
I know, I understand it. I'm not saying, but
but
they also say they're not sure where it's coming from.
Sure, it could also be something. Now I'm in the realm of fantasy, but I mean, imagine a solar storm causing a bolt of energy to come and reflect it off the ionosphere, and somehow it is what's the word I want to look for? Collimated by some weird effect in the atmosphere, and it affects people beneath it. I'll give you an example. If you look up the term quote brain bomb and look up X-ray lasers, there was research. I'm trying to remember which lab. Not Hanford. In one of the labs, we were looking at the idea of X-ray lasers, but we're also looking at using nuclear weapons to generate powerful beams of energy, and one of them was the X-ray laser. But there were others saying if we focus this in a microwave of some sort, that we could cause a demographic beneath it to go to sleep, or to have deleterious effects of some sort or other. Look up brain bomb and look at the ideas behind that. And this dates back to the 1980s. So we know that electromagnetic and magnetic energies have interfaces with human thought, psychology, consciousness, pick one. And again, an experiment set out to do one thing, as we were talking about ionizing the atmosphere to create radar decoys, may have had unintended consequences on people who were sitting in the side lobes. It's hard to understand, or not hard to understand, but it's hard to determine what is and what is not the truth, especially when you talk about classified programs and the government wanting to keep those that knowledge secret so they continue to experiment.
Okay,
right,
but
I'm sorry, Linda, go ahead.
There is another example of the physical reaction in the physical matter world. Kinross Air Force Base over one of the Great Lakes back in 1953. It is still considered by everybody I've ever talked to, military or otherwise, one of the best cases of multiple witnesses, radar. The two pilots are scrambled to go up to look at what this unidentified aerial object is over the water outside of Kinross. And the airplane with the two pilots gets up to the UFO, and the radar reports that the UFO merged, and the plane and those men disappeared at that moment forever. They have never been found.
That's true. I believe that was an F-89 Scorpion.
That's it. It
that
was
involved in that. Yeah, I remember reading that as a kid, and I am mystified to this day exactly what happened.
It was a UFO that took it.
Well, yeah, but it was just that, an unidentified flying object, not an alien space vehicle. Whatever it was.
I think you can.
Witnesses.
Other dimensional time travel, whatever it is, it was not us.
Well, but Linda, I mean, when you say that, what if the EM field shifted and whatever? I'm just saying, when Chuck said that UAPs were terrestrial, we don't know, according to Condine, they don't know for sure, but they admit that they're studying this and that they're trying to weaponize it. That was the thing. That was the key to this report. Whatever this is, we need to further pursue it. We need to weaponize it. So it could tie into everything that we've advanced on could be the study of whatever some of or a lot of what we've advanced on could be the study of UAPs. Could it not, Chuck?
Yeah, sure, but let's talk about imagineering weapon systems, okay? And we do this. I mean, that's what DARPA is all about, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. How can we harness technology we don't understand exactly yet and turn it into a weapon that would give us superiority in the future? Like, gee, what do we do about North Korea? What's the coolest stuff that we could do to North Korea without dropping nuclear weapons on them? Well, how about rods from God? How about airborne lasers? How about all kinds of of strange weaponry that are that's within our reach, but not exactly within our grasp. I mean, we do this all the time, and have been doing it, since we became a nation.
Right, and the key to Conine was that they said after these planes were brought down, that they put together a group of scientists and astronauts, and I wish Edgar Mitchell was still around for many reasons, but I talked to him about that, and he was involved, and he did say that a lot of what people are dealing with out there involves this phenomena.
Yes.
Okay, and listen, this is not new. Okay.
And Chuck, Edgar said we are dealing with other dimensional intelligences. He used the word other dimensional.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with the guy. I can't. He's dead. But I would like to, try to put the point across that the United States looks at all kinds of technologies for military advantage and has been doing that for generations. Do you know about the Fugu balloons in World War II?
Yeah, you've talked about that before.
Okay. I talked about that last time. Okay.
Yeah.
We were busy. We were doing two things, and it's remarkable about how close they are to the UFOs. Because one, is they launched several thousand. The Japanese launched several thousand of these things, and we had we absolutely put a lid on these balloons so he wouldn't cause a panic, because the Japanese at the time were working with biological weapons against the Chinese, and they could easily have put the same weapons in one of these balloons, we thought. And we didn't want the Japanese to know that they were as successful as they were. Didn't want them to know where they landed. So we suppressed that information. We also went out, had an African-American parachute regiment, the 555th, which was the first set of smoke jumpers, but they were jumping in not only to put out the fires, but if one of these crashed in the woods, they'd try to get it out intact so we could study it. Ironically, we ended up using those things in balloons, carrying cameras against the Soviets in the early parts of the Cold War, before the development of the U-2 and before the SR-71, before spy satellites. We were launching balloons, and we copied the altimetric stabilization system, the thing that kept it at a constant altitude, from the Fugu balloons. We had we called air technical intelligence in World War II, and both in the Pacific Theater and in Europe. We had a squadron called Watson's Whizzers, Whizzers, Watson's Whizzers, who at the end of the war were charging across with the infantry across captured enemy airfields, grabbing jet fighters, rocket fighters, very fast propeller fighters, pointing ahead at the German, mechanics, said, "Show me how to fly this thing," and flying them out of Germany to France and then onto boats to export to the United States. We're doing that in the middle of a war. And the same thing with in the Pacific. Air technical intelligence was busy grabbing everything they could about Japanese aircraft for military advantage. One of them was they found from a captured logbooks on Zero fighters that the nose gear kept breaking. They analyzed the nose gear. There wasn't enough manganese to make the steel hard enough. We found out they had a limited amount of manganese, and next thing you know, we're flying B-29s blowing up manganese mines. So the idea of gathering information about either foreign technical intelligence, air technical intelligence, or phenomena that we can take advantage of, like uranium, we're there. So
right, but
understand
the key,
there's a broad brush out here looking at all kinds of things.
Yeah, but one of the biggest ones is plasma, though, Chuck, because I'll give you a couple. I want to go into a couple of projects that have been declassified. Yeah. I never thought this would ever come out, so I'd seen it, I knew about it, but I mean, I don't want to go too much detail. But the stealth fighter, they talked about how the paint was the key. It was not the paint that was the key. It was what they had on it when they flew into combat. And they actually talked about it on the stealth fighter webpage. It was generators that could create plasma effect, okay? And they would pull them off when they would use them in air shows or when you would see them. But the bottom line is plasma technology, which goes back to UAPs and everything else, is the key to everything. It's a key to Missiles like, have you heard of a project called Hit to Kill? It's called Project Defender.
Well, I know when you say hit to kill, to me, we used to call it the tomato can, which is an anti-satellite weapon that would guide right to the enemy object in space and destroy it by collision, by kinetic energy, and not with a nuclear weapon or an explosive. Are we talking about the same one?
Right, and it also used F-15s.
Yeah, that's correct. And the vehicle at the end of the rocket that was launched from an F-15 in near vertical flight at very high altitude would go up and multi-stage, and then use this what they called a tomato can at the time to home in on the reentry vehicle or the satellite and destroy it by impact. Yeah, sure.
And
right. I'm sorry. Go ahead then.
Well, John and Chuck, I just have been holding this for so long, and this seems like the right time. And that is North Korea fired another missile off their Friday. It's the 15th such test this year of 2017, and that we know now from scientists that the power of the hydrogen bomb underground probably was a hydrogen bomb, and that they're continuing to do this. And Chuck, this is my question. We're talking about electromagnetic and electrostatic and technologies that our government with the UK have been trying to study and back engineer since World War II. We're now at 2017, and we have this character in North Korea who does apparently have the ability to launch a missile that could reach, let's say, Minnesota, Michigan, or LA. And do you know, Chuck, even if it's classified, can you talk generally? Do we have some sort of an electromagnetic or laser weapon that can fail safe take out a launch that we calculated was headed for one of our locations?
We've done a lot of research with lasers. Do we have something operational? Well, it depends. Do we have something that can shoot from the ground to 100 miles in space? Not so much. And also depends on what day it is, because atmospheric aerosols, clouds, deep cloud cover, all that comes in when you're looking at something like lasers. Unless you're looking at some microwave radio frequency weapon through which the atmosphere is, to it, transparent. Yeah. Do we have it yet? Not in quantity. Are we dependent on missiles for this sort of stuff? Yeah, but there aren't enough of them, because as the Soviets learned from trying to deal with us and SDI is, the countermeasures they can put up completely changes the nuclear calculus. So the answer is, do we have anything? Yeah, we might have something in the locker, but may only be the only thing in the locker. And so you're depending on the roll of the dice that'll work the first time.
Linda, you wanted to ask Chuck about SPA war and SPAR war too, right?
Yes. Are you familiar with the Navy having the SPA war, and there's another acronym of SPAR war, and I have, here it is, the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command. Yep. And why this is significant, and we'd love to know what your perception is that we know that Hal Puthoff helped the Navy with terahertz research in the Star Wars program during the Reagan administration.
Sure, but everybody was looking at the time,
at terahertz.
It really depends on where the budget is.
No,
okay, it's about money.
He was looking specifically at terahertz for the Navy. That's significant.
Let's say you got $100 in your budget, okay, and to develop a terahertz system will cost $95. And the guy over here who's got a proven missile system, as the Navy has with their standard missiles, saying, well, okay, for 50, I can have 10 times the effectiveness, and I can demonstrate a hit-to-kill capability. Well, where are you going to spend your money?
But what kind of testing would that involve, and what would they need as far as to do all that?
Okay, you come back and say, okay, well, where are you in the development of this, whatever it is? And it doesn't have to be terabytes. You know, I've got X dollars, okay, and I need this. But this is a magic device that'll do everything, sir. Yeah. Is it ready now? No. Can you guarantee effects? No. Then you go to the other guy. Well, I got this JDAM GPS-guided bomb that I can lay down a circular power of approximately 1 foot, and everything within 100 meters gets destroyed. I'll take it. You understand, as we go up the chain to the people who sign the checks, they're going to say, what am I going to get for the expense of this money, for the expenditure of this money?
Right, and also
besides the expense, I'm sure. But is there? You got to convince the guy. Well, you were a cop, okay? Mm-hmm. You know, I got this really cool magic baton that you don't need a pistol for. You don't need a regular baton for. This thing will do everything. Then you're a cop. Your first thing in your head, my life is on the line. You're going to take my pistol, my mace, and my club away from me? And this magic baton does stuff? What happens when it's cold and it's rainy and there's ice on it? Does it work like my baton? No. Does it work like my pistol that's been in service for 50 years? No. Well, not so much. Come on. What would you do, John?
Well, right, I agree. But the thing was, the key to this was that some of the people you interviewed, these guys, said there was Navy intel there right after the incident. And there was a colonel that came out and said that it was spar war that was being taken place at those sites, and that Halt took a team in an area you shouldn't have went into. And
I never, ever heard from anybody anything about the Navy involving Bentwaters. Not while I was out there investigating. I heard, rumors of NSA, rumors of CIA, of OSI. I heard all that, but not at the time, John. It's 30-something years ago, but I don't have in my notes or my reports anything that mentions the Navy.
But there were 3 different people that said they were brought in, and one of the people that were there, I think even Peniston said that the Navy was there also at one point. Well, they were asking questions.
Hey, John, no. I mean, as far as anything that I did about Bentwaters, the Navy never showed up. I mean, maybe that's, later as you guys started to be easier with information, but in those initial interviews, never. I heard OSI a lot. I heard NSA a lot. Mm-hmm. I heard CIA every once in a while, but never the Navy.
I've got a question for you, and then I want you to talk about a project you talk about on the internet for a little bit too. You moved on to EM frequencies and weaponry and stuff right after Bentwaters. Did anything you learned from Bentwaters lead you down that path?
No, not at all. The reason why I did that report came from a paper that was released by the DoD in 1983 called Soviet Military Power. Okay, and I was a defense reporter, an investigative reporter. I went through that book, and I know that, and I came to one phrase and said radio frequency weapons, and I said, what the hell is that? I mean, I knew all the missiles, I knew all the bombers, I knew all the nukes, I knew the Vovoždujo, Oborani, Strani, all the good stuff. I mean, what the hell's a radio frequency weapon? And thank God I had a great boss like Ted Kavanaugh who looks at me and says, what the hell's a radio frequency weapon? I want to go research it, boss. Okay, and off I went. And that was months and months and months through the period of Bentwaters that, I was researching Bentwaters and RF weapons, within months of each other, but one did lead to the other. Only afterwards, when you and I started talking, years later, saying, John, this sounds a lot like this. It's, one did not lead to the other. Only after I had done that stuff for CNN, they said, gee, what if this was an experiment that did this? And what set me on it was Greg's description of what he saw was very different from what you saw.
Right.
You know?
Right,
he was talking about a 12-foot aspirin tablet that glowed red, I think he said, in the brown fog, right? Didn't he say 12-foot aspirin tablet?
It was, yes, but it was yellow. And then what came in above it were red lights that came and swooped around above the aspirin. And then there was an explosion, and out of the explosion came all of these spectrum, like you would look through a rainbow. All of these rainbow pieces came down.
Right, but it's different from what everybody else saw. Not tremendously different, but different.
But it could have been the night of the 27th. The middle night is the night that...
No, he was actually out there the night of Halt's incident. They were out there.
28th?
They were the ones that went out originally when England was out there, saw it, and then came back. And then Halt's...
Who was that other kid? He didn't ask for anonymity. Laplace?
Laplume.
Yeah.
Steve.
Laplume was one of the first guys I interviewed. I'd have to go back and look at the field tapes, but
his sighting, he had a sighting that was, wasn't it, John, 2 weeks after you got?
Yeah, and they all came out, and it was like a cigar shape in the sky.
Yeah. Big.
In Bastinza's description was different.
A little bit like Batram's, somewhat.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's what got me onto the idea of, well, do you guys know about RF weapons? That it came afterwards. I mean, literally years afterwards. Going, gee, that's really weird. It sounds like something I saw here. There are other books that were written in the 80s that were very interesting. One was called The Mind Race by Russell Targ, T-A-R-Q. That was interesting.
Do you mean Targ or Targ? Because Targ worked with Hal Puthoff and Green and those guys at Stanford.
But at SRI.
Yeah, that's Russell Targ,
Yeah.
T-A-R-G.
T-A-R-Q, right?
No,
Yeah.
T-A-R-G is in George. Targ.
Okay, well. All right, well, I got the pronunciation right. I spelled it wrong.
Yes, you
but
did.
Then you wrote a book called A Mind Race. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But he talks about stuff in there. And this is, again, we tend to look at this at a soda straw. Well, there's a mind race, and there's a RF weapon, there's this. We, the United States, looks at a broad spectrum of stuff to see if it's either has offensive or defensive capability. And that's the nature of providing for the national security, providing for the common defense.
There have been military eyewitnesses who have said that they have seen totally daylight beta consciousness underground at S4, Area 51, Wright-Patterson underground, a lot of different underground installations, craft that are defined as being not from this planet, and the remote viewers in Project Stargate at the next to NSA at Fort Meade in the end of the 80s, they were targeted with a variety of tasks that involved, after the fact, they then learned that they had targets that were extraterrestrials in this solar system, in this Milky Way galaxy, and in galaxies beyond. And as Lynn Buchanan told us on Phenomena Radio, that when he did his remote viewing, he realized the universe is teeming with all kinds of life, and they are not operating or communicating on the frequencies that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence under Shostak has been using, but that there are friendlies, there are unfriendlies, it's complex, and that this is, as far as the remote viewers are concerned, other life in this universe, in this galaxy, are a matter of fact, and they're waiting for the governments to tell the truth.
Well, the question is, whose government?
Well, it's the U.S. All the allies of World War II took on a policy of denial, and that started with Churchill and General Eisenhower. They there is one of the, we'll call it one of the documents that was released by the Ministry of Defense to the National Archive about 7 years ago. It was written by a man who is a scientist. I think Nick Pope actually knows who he is and where he works exactly. And he was the son of a security officer or guard to Winston Churchill. And he wrote a letter as the son of the father to say to the Ministry of Defense that ended up in the National Archive, my father heard Prime Minister Churchill talking with General Eisenhower, and they were talking about a silver disc that was doing circles around an RAF fighter, and that the speed and what was happening of anything that could run rings around a flying jet that Churchill and Eisenhower agreed was not from this planet. And it was Churchill who said to Eisenhower, we must keep this a secret for at least 50 years or it will upend religions and economics and society. And that is where the beginning of the policies of denial started, is because they knew, those two men knew, that they had physical eyewitness pilots and evidence of something doing physical rotations around a jet that was silver and was a disc, and nobody knew what it was.
Yeah, and both sides saw the phenomena. We called them Foo Fighters. I don't know what the Nazis called them, but they determined that it didn't have effect on anybody because they seemed to be harmless.
Well, they were lights. What this letter from the scientist to the MOD that ended up in the archive is describing his father hearing this discussion between Churchill and Eisenhower about a silver disc. The disc was itself going around and around and looping around the RAF fighter.
I haven't seen that, Linda, so I can't comment on it. And it's like third hand. It's the son of the bodyguard who overheard Eisenhower, and it's kind of hard to work with. I mean, send me the document. I'll look at it and get back to you.
I will.
All right. And unfortunately, guys, Chuck, this was a great show.
Yes.
And we're out of time. I'm going to make a quick little announcement. Unfortunately, my computer just crashed on me, so I don't have the statement. But you can look at the Terahertz. You can look at the statement I posted on Phenomenon webpage, KGRA, and my own personal Facebook page. I've got some more health issues. It very well could tie into what happened to me at Rendlesham. I'm not going to go into the issues at this time. They're doing more testing, and I may have to go through some more procedures. So I just want to let everybody know I'll be off the air for a while. Linda's graciously going to continue with the show in my absence, and when I get better, I will try to return as soon as possible. And I just want to thank everybody for all their support with Linda and I and Phenomenon Radio, and I hope to be back as soon as possible.
God bless you, John, forever.
God bless you, John.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Brother John. That's going to do it for another episode of Phenomenon Radio Live, exclusively here on KGRARadio.com. For John Burroughs, for Linda Moulton Howe, and for our good friend Chuck DeCaro, I am Race Hobbs, thanking all of you for listening. We're KGRARadio.com. Have a great night, a great weekend, and thank you for all of your concern and prayers for our brother John. We will see you next week. Good night, everybody.